Hey guys, we're in the middle of the new castle that's coming out later this week, and I'm going to show you something really cool today. It's a new functionality of Moulinette. You guys have seen hopefully my videos on Moulinette, its tile browser and other functions, but we're going to talk about something that has big implications for the Foundry community, not only for users and GMs, but also for content creators. Because today we're announcing Moulinette Cloud. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to open up my Moulinette interface, open up my tiles, and when you see my tile packs, I have all these Cartos assets. All these prefabs from him. I have almost 5,000 assets just in his artificial assets alone. And yet I haven't downloaded these. If you saw my last video where I put Forgotten Adventures in my local instance and we went through all those steps to turn them into WebPs and format them properly and index them, well, that's automatically done for me and it's in the cloud. I didn't have to download these. I didn't have to optimize them. They're just automatically there for me. I can browse them and I can drag them in just like anything else, but I didn't have to do anything. It's just all there. And not only are all of his assets there, but all of my assets are in here. All of my free scenes and my premium scenes are in here. Here's all my free maps. Some of them I'm still working on thumbnails, like this one, for example, is the whole town square, but you can't see it because it's pieced together with tiles. These are all the free maps from my free module, but then all of my premium maps are in here as well. Again, all in the cloud, all without having to install a module to do it. And last but not least, prefabs. All of my town prefabs, my buildings with walls and lights and sound, everything searchable, indexable. Let's do a search for weapon shop, just weapons. Find all the different weapon shops that are available to me, drag them right onto the scene, and I've got a fully formed building. So how is this happening? I'm going to explain how this works today, but I'm excited to announce that right out of the gate, Moulinette Cloud is supported by Bailey-Wiki, so all of my assets are in here, and as you saw, Tom Cartos and his assets as well. This will evolve over time. And right now, it's mostly good if you support either of the two of us, or if you want to support either of the two of us via Patreon. This is really meant, the cloud service is meant to be a premium service, and it's supposed to help people who support Patreons to be able to get to their content quickly and easily. You don't have to mess with all of these compendiums anymore, unless you want to. But you don't need compendiums now to browse and look for all the assets that you have access to. You don't have to worry about updating files or updating libraries. Like if Tom Cartos puts out something new, it'll just automatically be put into the cloud and you can access it just through here. So we're going to talk about this new service today. I'm going to walk you through, if you're not familiar with Tom Cartos, some of his assets so you understand what's available to you now. I'm also going to talk about, we're not the only ones to be using this, the Gorgon, who has a bunch of really cool animated assets. These are all supported in here. His Patreon assets will be in here soon as well, but you can just drag these animated assets right out of here onto your local scene and start making maps. And at the end of this, I'm going to talk about, for content creators, how you get your stuff into Moulinette. It's as easy as it can possibly be. So if you are a content creator and you're making scenes or sounds or tiles, or you want to make prefabs, you can put it all into Moulinette through the cloud. It's all based on your Patreon. I'm going to explain how that works as well. So it's very secure. It's very content creator friendly. We'll also have the contact information for the developer for this module in the description for the video, so you know how to reach out if you're interested in getting your assets into this system as well. For those of you who are on the Forge who have space limits, for those of you who just have space limits on your computers and you have gigs and gigs of stuff, Moulinette Cloud is the start to being able to relieve you of those kind of local requirements, storage requirements, and to be able to do some things that really kind of set you free from hunting and pecking for what you're looking for from a content perspective. So with that, let's get started with this tutorial. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we have the latest Moulinette modules installed. You may not use all of these. You don't have to install all of them, but the ones you want to use, you need to install the associated module. I have all of them installed and they're all updated with the latest version. And of course, they're enabled in my world. It introduces this button over here, which you guys have seen before. I'm not going to walk you through the basics of Moulinette. You can watch my other videos to see how it works. But what you'll see is this new Patreon button. So in order to use Moulinette, you need to be subscribed to Moulinette's Patreon. There's different tiers. I'm at the Goldsmith tier, but the smallest tier that you can be on for Moulinette is the $2 a month tier, and that gives you access to the system here. It's important to realize that this is hosting costs and a lot of other costs that go into supporting something like this. That's why there's a relatively small cost associated with it. The more Patreons that you support, obviously, the more bang for your buck that you get. So I support a lot of Patreons, and being able to navigate through a Tropos and other Patreons as I support to be able to get to their stuff is super handy for me. So hopefully we see a lot of these content creators get onto this new system, and definitely encourage you to let your content creators know that you support that this exists. So now that we've got the new Patreon button, we're going to go click on it. When we click on that little symbol, we're going to click allow. And when we get back to the screen, you can't see it now because I've already done it, but there will be a continue button. And what it'll do is it then enables all of your Patreon content inside of Moulinette. So this is important for content creators. Every time that somebody starts a new Foundry instance, if you want to use the Moulinette tool, you have to connect and verify your Patreon. That may seem like a pain, but when it comes to content creators wanting to make sure that their stuff's protected, and with all the piracy and stuff going around, this is really important to them to be able to make sure that this instance is secure. And so what's happening here is I've now enabled my access to the content. And if I open up one of these tools, whoever I am subscribing to, I'll now see them. I'll also see local things that I've done. So I've already installed Forgotten Adventures locally. So I have their assets here locally, but at the same time, the Gorgon and Tom Cartos are patrons that I don't have installed locally, and now I can search for them through the Moulinette tool. So let's go to Tom Cartos and go to his artificial assets, and let's do a search for a sword. And here's a pretty cool looking sword. I've got shadow applied. Let's make it glow. Most of Tom's assets are 256 DPI. Some of them are 150. You might have to play around with the size to make sure that you get it to the right size. Here's a pretty big sword that's glowing now. So what's happening is when I drag that from the cloud to my local instance, it downloaded it and it put it into a special folder. It's a folder inside of your Foundry instance. So inside of your Foundry data folder, it introduces a new Moulinette folder to where it'll download that information and put it into the proper place. This is also where you can go and clean things out maybe that you haven't used in a while as well, but that's where it stores it locally. And then from there, it will serve up this image to all of your players. So you're downloading a local version and then it serves it out to your players. So this is how you keep a really small data footprint with Moulinette. I don't have to download all of Tom's assets. I can just download the stuff that I want to use and it puts it into the scene for me. And it works with everything I showed you before, like being able to drop in a shadow. And it creates a nice drop shadow effect on your tiles. And this is how you can do really, really cool things with your scenes. So from furnishing empty buildings to other things, I'm going to show you some really neat stuff that Tom's got available here in just a second. So Moulinette works with tiles, it works with sounds, it works with scenes. Here's all of my premium scenes. Here's the Holy Church. It's If I open this, you can't see it. I'm going to have more thumbnails introduced later. My modules weren't built to support the thumbnails like Moulinette does, but I will be launching those here in just a little bit. But if I click Import Scene, it'll start to import not only the scene, but any dependencies the scene has built within it. So other tiles, drawings, sounds, all kinds of things. And my scenes tend to be pretty complex. So there's a lot of pieces that get downloaded with this particular scene. So let's go click over to it and see what it looks like. By the way, that's what these symbols mean within Moulinette is what's in these scenes that you're about to download. And as you can see, there is my entire dark church, and even complete with sounds. If I drag your player onto here, turn my sound up, so look at this really complicated scene with lots of moving parts that just works right out of the box with Moulinette's import system. And I didn't have to install a module to do this, except for Moulinette, of course. I didn't have to download my whole maps pack in order to create this. And that's what's truly powerful here. Content creators who aren't really good at all the modules and stuff like that, it's really easy to load everything up into here, and then Moulinette kind of takes care of the rest. So I also mentioned that prefabs work. So I have all of my prefabs from all my different systems in here. We do a search for the Lion Coaster. Here's a snowy and a regular version. And if I drag that, it supports token attacher. And it's a lot of pieces that come to this particular prefab. And Moulinette will download all of them, make sure that they're all in place. And once it's done, I've got a fully functioning prefab, complete with walls, sounds, lights, everything else. Of course, this requires token attacher to work. And if you are on 8 point whatever already, you know that token attacher and multi-level token are still yet to be updated. So right now, this Moulinette Cloud for prefabs and any scenes that are made with prefabs, like my modular scenes, they're really only 7.10 supported right now. As soon as those modules update, these will be updated to support 8.0 and above. Before I get into Tom's stuff, I'll just show you briefly. The Gorgon has some animated stuff in here. Here's, for example, his one of his flamethrower effects. This is brilliant. I love everything about it. And when you drag an effect onto the map, you can see this one hits a wall. He's got a bunch of those effects, a bunch of fire effects. For example, if you want to show a torch. By the way, sometimes you'll drag it and it won't show up right away. Just drag it a second time and it'll show up in the map. You can see that this adds a shadow effect at the bottom of it. You can drop it in without the shadow effect as well. Don't know if you know this, but yeah, the token magic effects also work with animated icons. He's also got smoke effects of different types. And then if you're a Patreon of the Gorgon, he will have, I think, all of his other assets in here as well. I'm a Patreon of his at the highest tier just because he's got some really, really neat stuff. I wish I could show you his horses, for example, in here, but I think they're coming to Moulinette soon. But let's jump into Tom Cartos. So Tom's biggest asset pack. And if you saw my Dungeon Draft video where I highlighted a lot of Tom Cartos' stuff that's been available for Dungeon Draft, it's those same packs, those same Dungeon Draft packs that have now been made available to Moulinette. In fact, Moulinette's so smart that it can recognize a Dungeon Draft asset pack and turn it into what it needs from an asset perspective. So let's kind of go through, and I'm going to show you some fun things that you can do with Tom's stuff. So right off the bat, you'll notice you've got some banners and things. Well, I have a little filter that I've created called, I have wavy fast and wavy slow. Let's see what happens when I use one of these. Here I dropped in a banner, and instead of applying a drop shadow, I've applied a waving effect. And you can take that banner and you can put it onto a scene, and it just gives you this effect like just a little bit of slight animation into a scene. So I have a faster version of that. Let's try, I got a black banner this time. And you can see this banner is now waving a little bit faster. It's just a quick and easy way to create some animated effects. But he's got lots of banners to play with, to be able to put into your scene, whether you want to animate them or not. All of these structures that you can add to any particular map, all kinds of items that you would find interesting to be able to drop into a scene, things like backpacks, tools, weapons. I even have a filter that I use where I can light something on fire. Chests, which you really can't get enough of. Bottles and food. Think about all those scenes where you need to dress a table and you don't have a dressed table. Trophies that you can put into your scene. If I drop this trophy in and then I make it a ceiling tile, you can drop that in here, and as you saw with probably a lot of the promos for 0.8, this is now in Foundry where a player can actually walk underneath that. And you can now walk underneath the trophy head. Lots of books. So in my scene over here, we've got this messy accountant's space, right? There's tons of stuff. And as the lore goes, you can do a check to find a book, a particular book. And here I've just dropped in a book. I've made it slightly glowing, and then I'll hide that. Now, as my players are searching the room, I can unhide the book. They'll see it glowing, and you can just insert all kinds of things like this for storytelling purposes. Lots of things to decorate a room with. You've got hookahs. You've got different types of beds and sleeping bags. You can now build those campsites on the fly that you've always wanted to. It's got a ton of really great paper assets, maps that you can put into spaces, letters, newspapers, lots of lighting, different types of lanterns, candles, braziers, lamps of different varieties, magical lighting. Speaking of magic, this is a really great set here. You've got magic mirrors and lighting, like I mentioned, but then you've got other really cool things, like, let's go to an empty room here. Here's this great hand and other types of things like that. Here's a head inside of a tank. These are super helpful. These magic circles. Just throw down a magic circle and you've got a teleport point. You may be wondering what these are. Let's take a look. So these go together to create magical sphere. I just made the top go away using the roofs module. Or you can make it not go away. You can set it up where it's always visible. And you can see your players inside of it. And I just love that, right? It's the tiny hut type of thing. And tons of weapons and armor. There's just a whole lot of that in here, and it's really helpful when you're building your scenes. You've got rubble and the ability to put rubble all over your scenes now. Various types of broken furniture. Tons of furniture in general. You know, things like hammocks. You know, you just put a hammock inside my tiny hut there. Sleeping bags. Here's some of your musical instruments. Here's a bunch of crypts that you can place down. Just put a top on it and even dress up the crypt with it, with someone. If you hold down shift, you can put it exactly where you want it. There's just ready-made crypts. Super awesome. There's a bunch of statues and broken statues. Really convenient staircases that you can drop into any scene to give yourself a way out of that scene. Same thing with ladders. A whole ton of traps. I have a trap macro that I use to make traps appear, to make these tiles appear underneath the player when they walk over it. Lots of gems treasure, trinkets. Some of his really good stuff are just these ships. Being able to drop in a boat. These things are beautiful. They can scale up and down. You can make them larger or smaller. You've got all of these wagons. Lots more armor. Really, you're just not going to find better armor and weapons than from Tom. Let's say you have a scene involving ships. Here's your cannon. Here's an arcane cannon. And here's a ballista. Just ready to go. And of course, you can resize these in different ways, right? So if I go to 150, I've got a really big cannon all of a sudden. Lots more weapons of all different types. Even larger siege weapons. There's a battering ram. Now check this out. We're in his building assets, and these are Tom's prefabs. Now they're not set up with walls and lights and stuff like mine are, but still, you can grab these, drag them onto a scene, and have a really good starting point for for just building out a scene really quickly, especially one on the fly. So these are undressed, but you can also find the dressed ones. I believe he uses 256 DPI for these particular ones. You know if you've got it right, because it will line up with the grid all the way around. And then if you look for the doors and the windows, they'll line up properly with the grid. So like this one, we might want to put right here. That way you can walk through this door properly. And everything else looks like it lines up. So use 256 as your default if you're trying to figure out how to make his prefabs work. But these are just great. And he's even got like second stories on a lot of his prefabs. And let me just show you how these work. So, this prefab is called 11. It's 11 by 8. So let's look at 11 by 8. And we find all these roofs down here. And we'll notice that this roof corresponds to this asset. Put that over the top. Make it a roof. And you've got yourself a Tom Cartos prefab right there in your scene. Of course, you have to wall it off and that sort of thing, but I mean, all this work done for you. Tom does provide in the free version just some sample components, some samples of his artwork that you can test out. His building assets is what has all the prefabs. You can also make towns, so he has sort of miniature versions of everything that you can just make a town on the fly. It's kind of an overhead view of the town. He also has a bunch of creature tokens. These are going to be larger in size. So you can use like 400 DPI to make them scale properly. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff. Here's creature tokens with variants. So you can get different types of horses, different types of caribou, that sort of thing. In his natural assets, you got a bunch of bones. Here's a fun trick. Let's say that you want to put into your scene some smoke. So we'll drag the smoke out here. And I'm going to, watch, I'll show you if I put a player over it. Well, he's walking on the smoke. And that's not great. So let's take that smoke. Let's turn it into an overhead tile. Again, you can do this with the new Foundry. And now my players can walk underneath the smoke, and it's a much more immersive effect. You also have these elements of lava and water. So if I do my wavy slow, I drag in this patch of lava, you can see it animates. And it slowly, you can put some sound effects in there and you've got some gurgling lava. Lots of ways to create rubble and blockades in your maps. And you've got really cool things like this, which is actually a pretty large tile. but it's just a circle of stones. Happens to be called Stonehenge in his assets. Super useful. So you guys can see Tom's got such a huge library of stuff. He really has enough to drop in anything as you're building. You can decorate whole homes. You can use some of my blanks or his blanks to be able to just create the beginning of it, and then use his stuff to drop in things like beds and decor, all the way to just dropping in surprises for your players. So, if you're using Foundry and you already subscribe, or you want to subscribe to Tom and myself, there's just a lot of assets now that you can get access to that you don't have to do a lot of searching for. They're just automatically in there, and you can take advantage of them. Okay, so let's talk about how to get content into here. This is for the content creators out there that already have content. You've already got tiles and maps, and you just want to make them available for Foundry users within Foundry. So what you need to do is pretty simple. You go to Moulinette and you subscribe to the Goldsmith tier. It's $10 a month, and that opens up your ability to be able to upload your assets to the cloud. What it looks like is when you go to this website, which I'll link in the comments or in the description, you'll get a blank one of these. It's a table that then you can upload your assets into. And so in this case, I've uploaded my modules for Foundry. So Moulinette is smart enough to be able to take a module, an entire module, parse through it, and figure out what needs to be indexed and how, and then ultimately make that available. It also goes through and optimizes all the images as WebP files, and also optimizes all of the naming conventions and things like that for Foundry. So it's as easy as just uploading a file, and then you get some options. Here's a file, for example, that I uploaded. Now, I've heard that you can just upload a Dungeon Draft Pack directly. I happen to zip this one. But the very next step that you do once you upload something, you don't have anything else to do but to prepare the package. When you click that, it'll start a process of preparing this package, and you'll see these little gears appear here. That means that Moulinette is working on this particular package in the background. You can upload zip files, you can upload modules like I have, and you can upload Dungeon Draft Packs. It'll handle any of those things. And while it's working, it might take a few minutes. You can come back here and refresh, and eventually this gear goes away, and you'll be presented with these options. So one of the first things that we can do is we can go and prepare it for Foundry. So we'll put in the publisher's name or the creator, what we want to call this pack, the creator's website, and then of course the copyright. And then you click publish. Other things that we can do is we can set who has the ability to see it. So for my free pack, for example, it's free. Everyone has the ability to see this. So I can click apply, and then everyone who subscribes to Moulinette's cloud service will get my packs for free. But likewise, I can set certain tiers that only get access to these particular packs. Now, as a creator, this opens up all kinds of possibilities for how I can publish my content. So for example, I may at some point make all of my tiles available just at my lowest tier, whereas my prefabs and my maps that are pretty complicated to make, those might be available at higher tiers. But that option becomes available to me now that the Moulinette system exists, and it lets me get more of my content out to more people easier than I was before. But it's as easy as that. Just processes through the pack, and then you set its permissions, and then you publish it, and then it becomes available to your Patreons once they connect their Patreon to Moulinette within their instance. And again, once they close their instance, they don't get access to it. So if they stop being a Patreon, they just don't get access to it anymore. So it makes it really simple for you as a content creator. It's really secure. You're not putting your entire libraries out there for people to steal and post to the internet or post to their friends. They're just getting access to the stuff that they're using, and it just makes it easier for content creators. especially if you don't know how to use and create modules and things like that. It's a really quick and easy way to all of a sudden put all of your stuff in front of the Foundry community and have them benefit from that, and yourself as well. So I hope you guys learned something from this. I hope you're as excited about the cloud system as I am. I think it really does open up a lot of opportunities for content creators and their supporters to come together in Foundry in a much easier, much more consumable way. I'm excited about the Castle release coming up this week. It will support Moulinette in various different levels, not just the cloud version, but hopefully, at least for my Patreons, you guys enjoy having more options for how to find and consume the content that you're really looking for. And I'm really excited about other content creators coming to the table. I don't get paid anything by Moulinette for supporting this. I just really believe in the vision that that Gorgon Dubal, the developer, has got around this system and what it's really can open up in terms of possibilities for the Foundry ecosystem. So let me know in the comments if I missed anything or if you have questions. This won't be the last video that I do on the system, certainly as it evolves. But I'm excited. I hope you guys are. And in the meantime, have fun making your maps.